Welcome to my Incredible Friends show. I'm Rachel Archelaus. I'm with Sherry Reichert Belul. I used to watch YouTube and I would love the videos where two people were getting together, just talking and laughing and having so much fun. And I said, I really want to do that. And here you are. I'm going to share my friends with you, laugh with us, talk with us in the comments. Sherry and I talk about love and expansion and consciousness and all kinds of really cool stuff. So I don't even know what's going to come out, but it's going to be good. So, hey, Sherry, thanks for being here.
Oh, Rachel, I just love you. I love it. You are my incredible friend. And it's true, we never know where we're going to go. I always feel like any dimension is possible when I'm talking to you.
Let me tell you something about Sherry. She is an author, and last year she was published in the New York Times Modern Love section. Is that right?
That is right.
Yeah, it was a really big deal, a really big deal. And I just wanted to start this off by just saying, how did that come about? How did you know that you wanted to do that? How did you set aside the time to write that piece? And what was your process of that?
Wow, that was interesting. We had no idea where we were going to go today. I love that. Yes, it was a big deal to me. It was a really big deal. For people who don't know it, the Modern Love section, it's a personal essay section of the New York Times. And for those people who write personal essays, it's just a favored column because, first of all, everything has to be true, which I think is really important. And that also is hard to get into. And it's been something that for many years I just sort of had dreamed about, like, oh, I'd like to have a piece in there. I think because, as you know, we talk about love a lot. And I'm very interested in, and the column is very interested in exploring all kinds of ways that people love. And they touch a lot on unconventional love and stories about love. And it's interesting. I think you may know this story that at one point I wrote my obituary. So when I wrote the obituary, there were some things that were really important to me that I felt like at the end of my life I would really want to have accomplished. And there was a particular story of my life that is central. That is, I live with my ex-husband and I have a boyfriend of 15 years, and they are really great friends. We have a wonderful family together. And it felt like a story I wanted to share because I want people to know that love can come in all shapes and sizes, and it doesn't have to look like, a nuclear family in the way that people think of it. I really feel, and I bet you'll agree with me, I'd be interested to hear what you say, but I started doing everything I could to make it happen, which meant obviously writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and studying how there's a lot of articles about how to get into that column. And I also meditated a lot and visualized.
So, how did you know you needed to rewrite it? Like, what was that? Were you in a group? Did you just know it could be better?
Well, there's a word limit on the piece. And the first draft I wrote, I let myself just write it. The first draft I wrote was literally three or four times maybe the word count. So that for me, it was always obviously wanting it to be better, but mostly it was that chipping away at the stone, right? Until you get the Michelangelo, that because it had to be a word count, that was extraordinarily difficult. We've all heard that killing your babies, right? Your favorite, right? The little darlings. And it was a lot of loss of little darlings, that's for sure.
We'll link it below. Is it possible for us to link the story?
Sure, I'd love that. That's very sweet. I'd love that.
Okay. Like, what was your mindset? Why were you, were you meditating because you always meditate, or were you meditating for a purpose?
Well, I do always meditate, yes. So I do regular sort of formal Zen meditation, but I also do, if anyone knows Joe Dispenza, I do his sorts of visualizations that are more about sort of stepping into the life we want and visualizing it in advance. So the Zen meditation was an important part of it because that's really about letting life come through, and getting out of sort of conditioned mind. And that's really important as a writer, and I know you know that, right? So that is coming from a different place. But the Dr. Joe was really about because I had a lot of mind talk around it's impossible to get into this column. You know, you a lot of times there are people who are known writers, or there was just a lot of monkey mind about it. And so really the sort of thing I would visualize I would visualize myself walking down the streets of New York into the New York Times office and just sort of the glee of shaking hands with the editor. So that's I just visualized that over and over, and it had that. I just had that feeling of complete joy around it. So that's I just had that over and over and over again in my mind.
I'm in love with that. And you know what? I kind of tell me if this is too much or too personal, but so you had this pre-paving and then you almost couldn't publish it because a party involved wasn't on board. Do you think that was a manifestation of like your internal resistance? Like
Oh,
like you had unresisted enough to get it in the editor's hands, but you hadn't unresisted enough for it to be like totally smooth.
that's a great
And that's
question.
not a blame. We all get these
No,
things. I'm just wondering.
it's a great question. And it's interesting that you're asking about this. Like, I don't even know why you're asking about this right now. However, I just stumbled upon a recording you and I belong to a group of women, and we had a particular call. It was on my birthday at the time when I didn't think I was going to be able to actually say yes to the publishing of it. And I just recently stumbled across that recording, which is really interesting. So, yes, the answer is yes, it could be that. But in retrospect now, I think there was a whole new level of love I had to get to for the piece to be published. So there's a whole lot of love that had to happen, and a lot of sort of dropping of convention and from everyone involved. And yet I think that there was a whole nother level that had to be reached that you guys had sort of pointed to actually when we were talking in our group, that somebody, our friend Cynthia had said, oh, I think the story of this getting published is going to be as big as the story of that you're telling. And so I think there was really something in that. And by the time it got published, it wasn't about it being published anymore.
I love that. I love the idea that we need to reach a new level of love in order to catch up with ourselves. Like that's the only thing it's about.
Oh, I love that you just saw that and that you said that. And yes. And here's one of the stories. No, this is dropping in, so I'm just going to say it. So there was probably, I don't know, 3 weeks maybe between the time the editor called and said, we love your piece. Is it still available? And, when the whole story that happened of someone not wanting it to be published, and I was having a really hard time. And at one point, my son came to me and we were talking about it. And he said, I know this is really hard. I know you really want to be published in the New York Times. But when you think about it, you still have everything that you wrote about, which was like one layer of getting to what I needed to see, right? Like, that it's like what I wrote about was what was really important. And it was obvious to me that I couldn't have them publish the piece without the consent of one of the people that I loved, or it would totally negate everything that it was about. And I think my son, in his wisdom of at the time, I think he was 17 or 18, and seeing that. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, just to say, since we're just kind of delving into this, this was so interesting. But after I had that meeting with you guys, and you all brought in a lot of wisdom about maybe it's not the end yet, maybe we don't know how this story is going to end. And Carrie had said, just hold it lightly, like a potato chip when you're running. I always remember that. Hold it lightly like a potato chip when you're running, which is such an interesting metaphor for things. But I had gone away to take myself on a retreat and was doing a really long, the hour and 15-minute Dr. Joe. And during that meditation, a hummingbird came and like literally right here and broke me open. I felt like it was God coming down, or, it was magical fairies, whatever, And right after that, I got the idea to write a love letter to the person who, had not wanted it to be published. And that was the love I think I needed to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I love
Wow.
that we always talk about love, Rachel.
I know. Well, actually, I wore this shirt in your honor today. It says Downtown Stories About Fictional Romances.
Oh,
And it's a New York shirt.
I know. We're going to meet in New York someday. Can I just go in a different direction?
Yeah.
I know this is what we do. And it's like what I love about you, one of the many things. So when I'm talking to you, things just kind of come, right? Like different strands. Like, I don't know why you decided to start with that. That was a shock to me. But the thing that's coming up for me right in a minute that I think would be great to talk to you about is we're in the middle of um, a movement right now, right? Like, so we're in the middle of the whole Black Lives Matter, and there's protests. There's a lot going on as far as how people are engaging with one another. And one of the things that I've been struck by, and I haven't had a chance to talk to anybody about it, so I'm so happy that we're here doing this. On social media last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, I started seeing a lot of things pop up that said things like, it's not enough just to love, or it's not enough to be loving, you know. You have to do this and this and this and this. And I've been sitting with this all week, this idea of, is that true? Is it true that love isn't enough? And you're the perfect person to explore this with, right?
Yeah. So I was wondering the same thing. I have a pretty strong belief that we create vibrationally first. And so my feelings are the biggest creator of my life. And then through those feelings, I'm inspired into action. I was inspired into action in many ways in the last few weeks. But if you're not, so if you have love, yes, that's enough. It has to be, right? And even though I was kind of wondering the same thing, I have a friend called Norman Love, and he's an African American man living in Hawaii and is so compassionate and beautiful and loving. Like everything his last name, I'm sure he made that up, but would suggest. And he said, this time is all about coming back into love. Love is really, it's the destination. So of course it's enough, right? That's what I got from what he was saying. And it was just a validation of like, okay, it's, it's weird for me to talk about race because I have friends who are white and black, and I don't necessarily see them that way, even though I know there are things in this country, of course, that are stacked against them. I'm not denying that, but I was looking to him to see, how are you dealing with this? Are you finding that love is really what we're looking for as well? And I got a yes. So, it has to be.
Well, and I love that. And it's like, I guess that I've been thinking about it a lot this week, right? And I think you touched on something that's an important piece of it, that it's not just talking about love, right? So I do understand that it's like, so if I'm just sort of putting out whatever, I'm putting out social media saying love is the answer, but in my own life, I'm not really living from that place authentically. That's one thing. But that in my own life, my experience and the experience of people that I coach or that I've worked with closely, when we practice love, there there's usually an action that comes from that. It's
Yeah.
not like it just sort of lives in us. And there's a way that, like what you just said, I think where it's like we're walking down the street and we're not thinking black, white, old, young, rich, poor, but we're just like, oh, you're just open.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really what we're going for. I think, but again, like I'm afraid, really, I'm afraid to talk about it because I'm coming from white privilege. And yeah, so I'm glad to talk to you about it.
Yeah, same. I mean, I feel similarly. Our other friend Carrie and I had a live stream yesterday where we talked about it, and we just guided people into an intuitive art drawing to get their own answers of how they can be most beneficial right now. And I think that's all we can do. I think this is such a personal journey. Like some of us are letting go of real trauma,
Yeah.
and some are just now learning that they are more compassionate than they were last year. I think everyone's growing in their own way from this. And the thing I keep coming back to is pushing against doesn't get us anywhere, right? Like having an energy of judgment or things are wrong, like focusing on the problem, it
Yes.
doesn't make it better. And focusing on the solution and on the side of love and growth does. We're inspired to real change in that way. We are connecting with the people who can make a difference that way. We're not just creating a force to bump against, right? Like
Yes.
love breaks that and allows movement, just like your meditations. So I'm confident in that way, and in that way I'm doing my own work. Right.
I really love that. And it's interesting because yesterday, I work for Brendan Burchard, and he was talking to a group of coaches and saying exactly what you're saying, that it's like in coaching, we're not dredging up the past. We're not trying to, dredge up everything. What we're doing is we're looking at, letting people have their feelings, but that the point is
Yeah.
to once someone's been able to have their feelings, what's one thing that we could do, toward the future that we want? Like that's what I love about coaching, right? I love the mentality of looking to what we want. And I feel like, to me, everything that we're talking about, the foundation has to be love, right? Like it just has to be sort of an unconditional, that's an important piece of it, which,
Hmm.
I know you and I both practice, but that's the foundation of the future we want, right? Like for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing visioning around this. Like, what do I want the world to look like? Of course, like
Yeah.
unconditionally loving and equal and beautiful, and everyone has resources, and, like, of course, that's what I want. And so I've been actively looking at that. And then me focusing there, it's going to draw me there. So any action that I can contribute in creating that, I will become aware of.
Yes, right? And I think that that's so. I just saw something I don't think I've ever seen before when you and I talk about love. I think, tell me what you think, but I think when we're talking about love, we're talking about life. We're talking about tapping into not like this human being, oh, I love my friend Rachel. That's
Yeah.
fine and that's lovely, or I love coffee, like it's not about this manifestation. It's about opening to what you're talking about, which is a world of love where life, and we know that. I mean, you look around, life is so abundant and giving and generous and loving. Like, just it feels like to me the nature of life is that big love. And that's what, like, what I hear you say, that's what I like. I want people to have that generosity in their lives, whether it's the food or work they love or people they love, living places that they love, but that it comes from that bigger place, and then each individual gets to experience it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like love is a force, right? It's a force we can tap into and harness. It's like the foundation of creation. I see it as that life force.
Yes, and I'm so happy to be talking to you about this because I think that sometimes when I'm listening to all this stuff going on, right? Like this human being just gets like, I noticed yesterday I was so exhausted, like just I could barely stand. And that's not typical for me. I usually have a
Mm.
lot of energy. And I thought, what's going on? Why? And I realized that I was running all this other belief systems, like maybe running them through to see, like, am I wrong? Is this, so it's really interesting.
I've been doing the same thing, especially like the past 4 days. It's been harder, and I've had to really focus more. I, I normally take walks and listen to like fun, uplifting things, but lately I've been taking walks and listening to a meditation. Like
Oh,
I've needed more reinforcement for sure.
yeah, and I'm grateful because I feel like you're reinforcement for me right now. And this just dropped in, which is interesting. Like, again, I don't know why you talked about the modern love piece, the first thing, but the interesting thing about that piece is that my dream was that people would read that piece and say, for instance, people getting divorced might understand, like, oh, we can still have our family. We don't just because we're getting divorced doesn't mean we lose our family. Like that was my dream. And that did happen, right? I got a lot of those kinds of letters, but I also got a shitload of, you should be dead, you're an awful person, I can't believe you're raising your son in this environment. Like there was so much hate that came out at me. And a similar thing happened where I got kind of off balance. It's like something I believed so, with everything that I had. Suddenly I was kind of like, ooh, am I an awful person?
I know. I think about that too sometimes, and I think I have different views than a lot of people. And, if I get a bigger platform, can I handle it? You know? Like,
Hmm.
what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, like, I think that there were so many big things about publishing that piece that were nothing that I thought they were going to be. So that's in the overall, right? I think that's the first thing, is that the gifts were completely unexpected, but that biggest gift of, do I have the strength to be who I am in the world and to voice it? And I think it's exactly what you're saying. Like, that was a platform that I hadn't had before, right? Like, that was a big platform. And I was so naive, even though the editor had said to me, listen, no matter what the piece is, it could be the most benign piece in the world. We get tons of hate mail. And he said, your piece is not benign, so make no mistakes. Even though he said that, I was still like, oh, people are
I'm Sherry. I love everyone.
people are just going to be opening their hearts. And so it's exactly what you said, I think. And this is not a done practice, right? I mean, that was like a year ago, and I am still midstream in this whole looking at, how much am I brave enough to say?
Gosh. Oh, I mean, what a place to be in. Why can't we just be like, of course, we can say everything.
Right?
That is like my biggest that's like my purpose on this planet is to be a fully expressed person. So I totally get it.
And I mean, this is why we're friends, right? Like, this is why we're having like this conversation, to me, is so important. Right now, I have a group coaching, small group, like 10 people on Tuesday nights. And this is one of the central things we're looking at, is this whole idea of, what holds us back? What is it that keeps us from, and it's, for some people, it's a very, well, for me too, sometimes it's like not even being able to speak words that I want to say, because there's, oh, am I going to offend someone? Is that going to be misunderstood?
Well, if you
Somebody,
guys want more on this conversation, go check out the Intimate Alien episode where we talked about this at length because that was really good.
that's right. That's right. Intimate Alien had some great things to say. In fact, I think I'm going to have to go listen to that again.
I did. I listened to it yesterday.
Yeah. So, and it's not, this is not separate from any of this, right? Like, so the modern love piece is not separate from the protests and the riots and what's going on with people having a voice right now. it's not even separate from, so like the person who didn't want that piece to be published had a very good reason, which is that idea of once something's out in the world, you have no control over how people hear it, which is an
Yeah.
interesting thing. Like, even this conversation may seem really benign to me and you. It does to me. Like, oh yeah, what? But once it's out in the world, if we put this out, like say some magically you had 1 million viewers tomorrow, probably thousands upon thousands of people would hate us.
Yeah. And like the key is to know that their reaction has nothing to do with us. But I know that's easier said than done. And we should even say, though, that your piece in Modern Love was one of the most read of the year. Like, didn't it show up in their roundup? So
Yeah.
it made a huge impact. And of course, it's just like the vocal minority who are complaining about it. I'm sure it touched more than you'd ever know, right? It's
Mm,
just, our work, if it does trigger people, that's not a bad thing. We're hitting a nerve, right?
well, right. And so as I'm talking to you, what's coming up more strongly for me? I'm going to be 56 this year. So, right. So it's like, I hope to live to be past 100. That's my visualization. I dream, but who knows? But it's like, it's time, right? Like, I just keep thinking, it's time for me to speak what's true. And exactly like, so what you're saying is there's going to be all kinds of responses, but the whole point is actually none of that matters as much as being true to what's coming through. Like, so if life is coming through me and I'm saying, oh no, oh sorry life, I don't think they're gonna like that. You know, what else you got? Like, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And about the whole like time moving forward thing, a couple of years ago, I felt that way when my dad was sick. I just realized the same thing. Like, what am I waiting for? Why am I waiting? I just kept putting things off that I really had wanted to do for a long time. And I had the stupidest excuses, like
Mm,
my boyfriend wouldn't like it, or, who am I to do this? And none of it was true. Like, he was not holding me back at all. And no one was. And then, so I did. I made big changes and I did what I wanted to do. And life changed and it became a lot better, you
wow.
know? So, it's when you get that feeling of like, gosh, what am I doing? Why can't, it's time, it's time. And it's not that you were doing anything wrong before, it's that you were just getting ready, you know?
Yeah,
But follow that for sure. For anyone listening, like, it's worth it. Do it.
right. Because it is everything, really, right? Like, we've all heard, or at least most people by now, the biggest regrets on the deathbed by Bronnie Ware, the hospice worker. One of those top regrets is I didn't live my own life. I didn't live my own life.
Yeah. That
And
doesn't feel good, right? Like we just want to be.
right. And the thing is that I don't know, this is coming back to like my foundation of love. Like, when I see somebody on the street, like, who I just, you could feel their energy of them just being themselves. I don't even know what it is, but you just feel. Even if they look nothing like is my style or my preference, or they're talking about something that I don't resonate with, that energy of pure life force is so magnetic and it's so beautiful. Like, I want to be around it. And I think, to me, again, this is why it's like the foundation, this love and totally being who we are. It's such a beautiful combination because I don't see any room for discrimination or hatred in there. I just
Yeah,
don't.
exactly. So good.
Oh my goodness.
Where to? Oh, we only have 10 minutes left. Holy cow.
I know. I just went so fast, but let's sit for a minute. Let's just sit quiet for a minute.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I said sit quiet and I started talking.
That's okay. I'm ready.
Because I realized, like, for me, like, that's where it starts, right? As soon as I said, let's get quiet, I realized, like, oh, for me, that's how I know who I am or what I want to express or what's coming through me. And I feel like that's what I've been longing for this week. I just realized that, like, the exhaustion is there's been so much coming in, and I feel like the sponge that got too, like, full of everything for me at least, and I'm curious for you. It's like it has to come from this other place. It has to come from this, like, I always call it dropping in. Like, it just feels like life just, drops things in. It's not even through there. I just feel it.
Yeah, same. It's to me, it's the difference between receiving and thinking it up myself. Like I want to receive.
Say more. Was there more to that?
I mean, 'cause you can tell, right? You're saying it's a different feeling. I can sit and think about something and it doesn't usually get me anywhere. It's like a loop. I don't it doesn't nothing resonates as the truth if I'm just thinking different scenarios. Yeah,
Yeah.
but in silence or quiet or however you get yourself to that space, art, walking, running, exercise, movement, meditation, whatever, taking a breath, then you can feel the difference when something comes in because you weren't thinking about it. It just pops in and it feels right.
Yeah. Now, do you think that everybody knows that experience?
I don't think many people have thought about the difference. No.
Because
But
to me, that's essential. Like, that feels to me, because sometimes when I think about things, I'll think of something. But inevitably, that something is, it's what I call cardboard cherry, right? It's that it's it's so curated, and it's kind of self-conscious in the way of, consciously being created for something. And the energy is just absolutely different. Then something just drops in and, like, send that to this person or whatever. And I'm like, okay, it's full of life.
yeah, and I hear from a lot of creators, people who make art or write blog posts or make videos, the things they make just because it just came to them and it was really fast and easy, that's the stuff that takes off. But they'll be like, the things I work really hard on never go anywhere, right? Like they can toil over an idea and think it's like so balanced and wonderful or whatever it is, and then nobody likes it.
I hope this is okay to say. Do you remember the story you told me about the bunting on your table?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So I was just telling a friend I love that story. So maybe you should say it, and then, because I feel like that's such the perfect story of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I used to show my art in New Haven, Connecticut a lot, and I had this show. I had a whole space to myself, and I set up all my stuff. I was doing like quilts, visual quilts, and painting on quilts, and I had this message that I wanted to get across, and I just made this fabric bunting, and it went across the top, and it was just safety pins with different rectangles of fabric. I just made it for fun in my spare time, and I just hung it up. And every single person that would come into my section would only comment on that fabric bunting, just safety pin pieces of fabric. I didn't consider it art. I did just hung it up. And so, yeah,
Ah,
good illustration of it.
I know. I was just telling my friend, because we were talking about this whole thing of curating, and that fine line. Like, once, I think you had even said, like, you had just kind of come up with an artist statement, and you were in, and I think about that, and I think about it in my own life, right? So the bubble flash mobs, for instance, where Ian and I are just out in the park, making bubbles for fun, and we both always dress the way we dress up because we love to dress up, and that it's like switching around to realize that it's like that's the life, not the curated, let me show.
Oh, Sherry, that's so good.
Right,
Yes, like everything else is trying too hard.
it is everything else. And I think what's happening for me as we're having this conversation, this is so good, Rachel, you don't even know. So for the last few days, I've been trying so hard to understand what kind of good person I should be. How can I be a good person? How can I be the right person? How can I, it's like such this freaking effort. And our conversation is just pointing me to like, I just need to be myself and to trust, like, I am not a bad person, and maybe to trust, like you're saying too. It's like when I relax like that, like this morning, I signed up for a fundraiser that a friend is doing, to raise money for Black Lives Matter. And it's something that felt natural, right? It wasn't like, oh, I should sign up for this because that's what a good person would do. And anyways, I could tell too, when I saw her fundraiser, like also I could tell that just came from her heart, like that I don't even know how, but it's like I just know, partly I know her, but I also just know you can feel it, right? You can just feel when something's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is fun being an incredible friend with you.
Thank you. It's so much fun for me too. I mean, and I just love how we can talk about really serious stuff too, and it's still all about love.
I know. And this was great. I hadn't really even thought like, oh, I need to talk to Rachel about this, but I did. Like, that's what's so great too. Like, this is where the generosity of life comes in, right? You were on my calendar for today. Don't know how that happened, but it was like this generosity from life to offer the space to get to stand in somewhere that is really important to me, and to do it with somebody that I really love. So
Yay, awesome. We will let you go, Sherry, but thank you so much for being an incredible friend. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Chime in down below if you have things to add, and we'll see you next time. I'll also leave Sherry's website down there. You have to go to it because she is the creator of the Love List, which has changed my family's life. It's all about like focusing on a relationship and just writing down what you appreciate about them. And it's a life changer. So go check it out. Everything she has to offer is amazing and obviously love filled.
and also, can I add one thing? People can disagree with us. Like, I want to open that up so that we really get the chance to, like, open it up to anything people want to say, and let's all practice saying what's true.
Yeah, love it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Love you.
Lots of love, Sherry. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you soon.
Bye, sweet pea.
Bye.